Hello. It is 2024. I'm back in Los Angeles and I've just ranked my 10 favorite books that I read last year. I read 57 books in total for the year, which is 5 more than last year, which I did not expect to happen at all. And ranking them was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Now, this does not include any rereads for the year, and it also does not include any of the Harry Potter books, which I read for the very first time this year. And I'm thinking that's gonna be like a whole separate video, and it just didn't seem right to lump those in with the other books that I read this year. And it honestly would have taken up possibly 7 of the slots. So besides those, out of the 57 books I read this year, here are my top 10. Working backwards, in 10th place, we have Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. My best friend and I are both big readers, and we live on opposite sides of the country. And so something fun that we started doing this year is just a little book club. This was the very first book that we chose to read this year. It's extremely intimidating, not just because of its size, but because of the dialects that are included. There's so many different storylines going on. It's a lot to keep straight, but it was so worth it in the end. I marked up so much of the book, and a lot of it honestly was just trying to keep everything straight, but I also wanted to kind of treat it like I would a book at school. My best friend is wildly intelligent, and so I feel the need to do the most to try to keep up with her. But I really liked Cloud Atlas. I think David Mitchell had a lot to say and said it in such a creative way. This is one of the most creative books I've ever read in my life. I read this at the very beginning of the year, so I'm trying to remember how many different storylines there are. Okay, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 storylines, and these span from long ago to well into the future, and it's just one big spider web that connects stories of humanity, of loss, of how we treat the earth, of consumerism, of love. It really just encapsulates everything throughout time. And at the end of the day, this is in my number 10 spot just because there were a couple of the storylines that I cared for less than others, but the ones that I really liked, and I was also pleasantly surprised by several of the storylines that I didn't think I would care about. There are so many quotes. I was going to leave you with one, but I honest to God don't know if I'm gonna be able to find one. I think I'm gonna go with a very Kelsey quote. This is from the section entitled The Ghastly Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish. And my favorite quote was, "The pieces fell into place and I fell into pieces." This is a modern classic. It is not an easy read, but I would highly suggest getting into it. Get into it with a friend, get into it with somebody that you can chat with about it. I don't think I would have been able to keep everything straight otherwise. But yeah, this is a masterpiece. In the number 9 slot, I have The Course of Love by Alan de Botton. I initially picked this up because of the cover. This is just a Kelsey cover. I was feeling very angsty that day, and I ended up falling in love with the narrative and with the voice that Alan writes with. I would say if you love 500 Days of Summer and you wouldn't mind reading a book from Tom's perspective, that's the best way I know how to explain this. This is like a hopeless romantic who lets things get away from him, and he oftentimes doesn't pick up on the grander picture of things, and oftentimes makes him the main character, and he's a little narcissistic, and so he doesn't quite read people well, and it's just about a young man falling in love, and generally just all of his wonderful hopeless romantic thoughts. And the quote that I'll read you from this one is, "Ideally, art would give us the answers that other people don't. This might even be one of the main points of literature, to tell us what society at large is too prudish to explore. The important books should be those that leave us wondering with relief and gratitude how the author could possibly have known so much about our lives. So that's my number 9. My number 8 is Franny Zooey by Salinger. I read Catcher in the Rye in high school, and I would like to read it again soon as an adult, but I had never read anything else by Salinger. And I picked this up a long time ago with intentions to read it, and then one day just like had an urge to for some reason. And I absolutely love this. I think originally it was based on, or it was 2 short stories that Salinger posted in the New Yorker, I'm pretty sure. And then he ended up putting them or publishing them together as a novel. I think I just really enjoy the way that Salinger writes. He's very quotable, but you also just feel like his characters are somebody that you can meet in real life, that you could bump into on the street. They don't seem out of this world or unrealistic, and ultimately those are the books that I enjoy the most. It's short, it was a fast read, and my favorite quote from this book is, "I'm sick of not having the courage to be an absolute nobody." This was a quote that I loved growing up, that I have written down several times, that I truly think about and reflect on in my own life, and I had no idea what it was from. And I had the urge to read this, and then I came across that quote and I was like, oh my god, that's why I was supposed to read this. So that's number 7. Nope. That's number 8. Number 7 is a new author to me this year. Her name is Annie Ernaux, and I included The Possession in my list of favorites. I came across Annie because of a YouTuber that I follow that heavily cited her work. I love how little, I don't even know that this could be considered a book. I love how little it is and how easy it is to read. You're basically just reading a woman's diary almost. It's based on Ernaux's own personal experience having an affair with a much younger man, and I look forward to reading everything of hers. I also read A Simple Passion this year, which I liked a little less, but it was a very similar topic, and I felt like she was almost repeating a lot of the same ideas and complaints about her life. And so I almost wonder if it just depended on the order that I read them in, if I would have enjoyed Simple Passion more if I had read that first. I think I'll be able to tell that a little bit more the more that I get into her stuff. But I just find the way that she writes so courageous. She's so willing to just put it all out there. So much so that the opening paragraph of this book is, I've always wanted to write as if I would be gone when the book was published, to write as if I were about to die, no more judges, even if it's an illusion perhaps to believe that truth comes only by way of death. Number 6, I don't have with me. It's called Really Good Actually, and it comes out in paperback next week, I think, so I'm excited to get to go pick it up, but I borrowed this one from the library. This was just fun. It was true, it was real, it felt like just comforting to get to hear someone else in their 20s talk about just everything that plagues them. I was feeling whiny and I felt like I wanted to complain, and I felt like Monica Heise's narrative in this book about growing up really helped me feel like I wasn't alone. And it was just funny and very truthful. Some of the things that she wrote about in that book, I felt like I had never heard anyone say out loud before, but it's something that rings very true with me. And I really enjoyed it. It was a thick book, but I felt like I got through it really fast just because of how much I enjoyed it. Number 5 is The Maidens, which I'm sure you've seen everywhere along with Alex's other book, The Silent Patient. I have loved getting into mysteries and thrillers these last 2 years, and I love the way that Alex writes. I think I read both of these books in one sitting. I had to know what happened. I think he writes such good cliffhangers and plot twists. Even if you see them coming, I feel like you still don't get the small bits and pieces that I feel like only he can come up with. I don't know where it cut me off, but I was just suggesting to read The Maidens if you like dark academia, and then you have other books by him to read as well, which is great. I'm feeling so sleepy. I feel like none of my words are making any sense and I can't come up with descriptions for anything. But my number 4 is The Marriage Plot by Jeffrey Eugenides. I'm very excited to get into Jeffrey's other books because The Virgin Suicides immediately became one of my favorite books after I read that last year, and this one was just as amazing. The Marriage Plot really just details the idea of growing up and falling in love and following a few students, but I think what was particularly amazing about it is how Jeffrey talks about their love for books and for academics and for literature. The blurb on the back starts, "Are the great love stories of the 19th century dead, or can there be a new story written for today and alive to the realities of feminism, sexual freedom, prenups, and divorce?" I really love the way that Jeffrey writes and feel like he puts such care into his characters and really feels for them as he writes about them, which I love. Number 3 is Strangers I Know by Claudia Durastanti. I originally picked this up from the library first because of the cover is just phenomenal. And then I got, I don't know, a third of the way through it and realized I was just gonna have to buy it because of how much I loved it. I wanted to be able to mark it up. This absolutely fits into that same category with Annie or No of blending the line between memoir and fiction. And Claudia very specifically wrote it that way. It was the idea of learning about things that happened to her parents when they were growing up, or her family before she was born, or before she could really remember it. How our memory alters as we grow up, and the idea that some of those things could be fictionalized, you know, us not fully understanding what was happening when we were a kid makes it more of a story than being truth. And so she kind of wanders back and forth between these two genres as she remembers things about her life. I think that the way that Claudia wrote it is so fascinating and really made me think a lot after I read it. The afterword of this book reads, "Fiction hurts, imagination hurts. Strangers you never get to meet hurt. In celluloid and on paper, it's perfectly possible to break up with people, to never speak to a parent again, and to eventually forget them. I find it harder to break up with fictional characters that I really cared for." And then she goes on to say, "What follows is an incomplete list of published works that turn me into a character or a person, depending on how you see me. Genre, in the end, is just a game of possibilities and clues. It takes only a little misstep to slip out of a novel, to fall into an autobiography, and to resurface again as an essay, all in the short span of a sentence." And then she lists books and movies and albums that made her who she is. I loved this idea so much, especially since books and movies and music I really feel have shaped who I am, and I just love that blurring line between genres. So if you like anything like that, or you want to have a good think about your own life and your own memories, I would highly suggest picking up Strangers I Know. My second favorite we have already slightly discussed, and it was The Silent Patient. In the end, I like this one a little bit better than Maidens, I think, just because of the topics at hand. Maidens is more of a dark academia, and The Silent Patient is more of a psychological thriller following a patient who kills her husband and then refuses to speak any longer. And the narrative of the book follows the psychologist who is sent in to see if he can figure out what really happened and what's going through her head. I love a good psych thriller. I love a good plot twist, and I just absolutely devoured this book. I think this one has a little bit more to say than the other one regarding just life as a woman, honestly, and the difference between what it looks like when a woman is driven to madness and when a man is. And yeah, I cannot wait for his next book, which I think is supposed to come out in like a week. And my number one favorite book of the year is one of my last reads of the year, and it was Poor Things by Alistair Gray. I spoke about this because it was on my end of the year TBR. I wanted to finish it before the movie came out, which I did. And I also read this for book club with my best friend, like I did Cloud Atlas. And Poor Things is just one of the most unbelievable things I have ever read in my life. If you've seen the movie, you have a pretty good idea of what it's about, but it's the gothic tale of basically a female Frankenstein, and it really just strips the idea of being a woman down to its bare bones and lets you really sit and ruminate in who made up these ideas and these rules and why we follow them. I think I liked the movie better because I had read the book. So if you enjoyed the movie, or if you were confused or intrigued by the movie, I highly suggest picking up the book. It is so creative in the way that it is written. It includes so many different formats. There's pages of illustrations and handwritten letters, and I just truly love the way that Alistair wrote it. I don't know how anyone thinks up stuff like this. I think one of the easiest ways to explain the ideas of this book is there's a review at the very beginning that says, "Can a man make a feminist?" And if you really sit on that for a second, can a man make a feminist? I don't know, it's just like such a fascinating idea to start this book on. It is truly hilarious and truly just made me think a lot. I highly, highly suggest picking it up. And I also suggest watching the movie, but it is not a movie for everyone by any means. But yeah, those are my top 10. I think they range quite a bit, and I like how different I feel like so many of them are. I also read a lot of nonfiction this year, which I'll include in my longer video, but I would suggest any of these if you're interested.